So our job is just to question that narrative. You are correct in assuming that your job as a parent is to do your best to lead that young person to be an educated human being. You're correct. You are the primary educator. You have been since day one. All of these conversations that we're having around raising an educated human being, what we have to remember is we've grown up believing this is what it looks like. We've grown up with parents who said, no, this is what it looks like. We're all born into this. So we don't stop a lot of times to question ourselves, to question why. And that's not necessarily our fault, but what happens is once we start to question it, once we start to ask those questions, that's where that bravery comes back in, where we've got to go, okay, does college mean educated? Can you be educated without college? What does college do? Is that actually what education looks like? We have to ask ourselves all of those questions, and that's where the argument starts to break down.
To the mom that's like, my kid's not a hero, they need schooling, I would say that to the mom, that's a mindset issue. What you have to think, what kind of child am I going to gift the world one day? I'm sorry, but we have enough highly educated a-holes out there already, okay? That's not what I want for my children. And when you sit down and you have a conversation with a mom about what is the end goal of this journey you're going on with your child, is it to get a piece of paper and then like push them out in the world, oh, look how wonderful this is? Or do you want them to have an impact?
You almost never hear a parent that's like, my kid, not very bright. You don't hear those conversations. You hear, I know people say this about their kids all the time, but my child's really, really smart. My kid's really, that's the conversation that you hear. And by the way, rightfully so. So, the initial educator in me, the Socratic educator in me wants to say, okay, define dumb for me. What does that mean? What does that mean, my kid will be dumb, or my kid will be dumb because of me? What does that actually mean? Because I want people to think through that. But the reality is when they're just feeling their way through whatever is normal, in those first 5 years, they're going, oh my gosh, this young person I have in front of me is brilliant. He did this, she said this, she had this. And then what happens is we send them off to a system that has a very narrowly defined view of what success is. You've got to play this specific game well at this specific time, whether it matches with your child's interests, development level, background, no matter what. You've got to play this game really well. And if you don't, well, then we're going to equate that with you're not intelligent. But as a whole, people are born wildly, wildly intelligent. And what happens is we end up schooling them out of it. We end up training them out of it. We end up focusing them so much. They're like, wait, I'm a genius over here. I'm brilliant over here. John Taylor Gatto said genius is as common as dirt. After working with thousands and thousands of families, I would tend to agree. But they're going, man, my child is a genius right here. Look at all, this is a genius. Oh my gosh. Hey, do school. And it's not on that same spectrum. And they're like, well, they don't actually like that. Oh, okay, well, now they're dumb. And so if I'm gonna, put them in a different environment, now I'm experimenting on them somehow because we're not doing this narrow thing. And this is the experiment. They're a genius. They're brilliant humans. They're going down this trajectory. School ends up being the experiment. It's been this 120-year experiment and it's not going well. Your child's a genius, almost guaranteed. Your job is to cultivate that, not to narrowly define this other game that they're never going to play again after these few years, not to train them out of it, not to give them a false sense of hey, I'm not very bright.
Starting school is hard, first of all. The first year was really, really, really hard. Every mistake that you could possibly make, I made. Even as a successful businessman, I made mistakes in the business. As a good leader, I made mistakes as a leader. As what I think to be a very great educator and instructor. As a Green Beret, I've pretty much done it my whole entire life. And I made every mistake that you can do as a teacher, as a guide, as an instructor. Made them all.
The reality is we have done this for a long time. We've made all of the mistakes. We've launched a number of schools. We've helped thousands of people through home educating. We've seen the game of getting into schools and getting into college. We've seen the game of going straight into the workforce. We've seen the game of building out six-figure businesses before kids even leave high school. We've seen every single bit of that. So we're truncating essentially 2 decades of knowledge into what we are doing here. So really what we're selling is speed of awareness. It's the speed in which you get to the point from being schooled to being educated.
When it comes to the character of your child and who they're gonna end up ultimately being, and you look at a system that's not serving children well, are you really comfortable? Are you really gonna sleep well at night, knowing that what the outcome could possibly be?
So here's the reality of it. It's very possible that you hear all of these things, that all of a sudden you just go, I get it. That makes sense to me. I should have always had it. And by the way, I can have it right now. I can pull my child from school right now. I can just move on, bring them along. Like I don't need to go to any outside. So I don't need to. You may be in that spot right now. And I would argue that's exactly where you need to be. If there is a fear in doing that, if there is still a fear and I don't know how, if there is that understanding of like, no, that is what I want, and I want to be around other like-minded people who believe that, but I also am going to need somebody to walk alongside me in this to get me to where I want to go, to get our family where we want to go. That's the bridge. That's what we are, is we're the bridge to get to that understanding. We're the bridge to connect you to other like-minded people who are also saying, we get it now, but we want to come together with an intentional community to go build. We want to be a part of the building process. We want to be a part of the mission of this bloodless revolution of building and changing and shifting the culture to this new reality so that future generations, so that my kids, and my kids, they are born into a society that understands what freedom looks like. And for them, that's their norm. I want to be a part of that mission of raising the baseline of what normal looks like now for our culture.
Yes, I think Apogee as a whole, the men's program, the young men's program, and the school have taught me that freedom is really everything, right? Without freedom, and really it's mental freedom, right? You personally as a man, having the freedom, between your ears is the first bedrock that you have to kind of accomplish, right? And then once you have that, you're able to kind of detach from any of these other quote unquote crutches we have in the world, whether it be the traditional schooling, the traditional, finances, the traditional job, right? There's freedom is everything, right? I mean, that's just what it's really come down to me, is that the ability to not have to answer to anyone but yourself is ultimately the goal that I think each man is striving for.
Again, you've grown up in the society where that is just what everybody does, right? Everybody just goes, so you've planned on that. Likely when you've planned to have a family, you've planned on, and hey, by the way, dad's going to work, mom's going to work, we send the kids to school. So that means we can bring in this much money, and it also affords us this much time because we're now outsourcing the education for our young people to somebody else, to a government entity. Even the people that are like, I don't outsource my freedom to the government, I don't outsource anything to the government, are still outsourcing their kids to the government. And they're doing but they've planned on that. And again, they didn't know there were alternatives to take a look. So then people find out, wait a second, there's alternatives. And it's actually almost always better than sending my kids into the conveyor belt program. So now I've got to figure some things out.
Yeah, the relationship between freedom and responsibility is one and one, right? Without the responsibility and the personal responsibility to do the things that you have to do each day, you'll never achieve the freedom you want in your life.
You're rarely ever given the keys to unlock the chains of your own enslavement, for sure. I'm with you. It's not necessarily the way the world's ever going to be built. Okay, so now what? Do you accept that and you just willingly turn a blind eye? Do you accept it, send your kids back into the fire anyways, crossing your fingers that they won't get burned, and then trying to do burn treatment when they come home? Or do you figure out a way so that they're not lit on fire every single day? That's not a question that I can answer for anybody. All I can do is get people to ask themselves that question, and if they're brave enough, sit with it long enough to decide what you're going to do next.
Yeah, if I was talking to someone who's on the fence, I'd probably tell them not to join. I think I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I think it's one of the things that drew me here was, the same thing with the school. It's not for everyone. And if you don't want to dive in, you don't want to commit yourself, then don't join, right? And so I think I would tell them that the program is life-changing if you want to put the work in, but no one's going to drag you through it. And so if you aren't going to fully jump in, the deep end without your swimmies and learn how to swim, then, maybe wait until you're ready to commit like that.
So it's very possible right now that you feel like your entire worldview has been shaken up. I definitely did. As an educator, as a father, I'd come to the realization that the things that I thought I knew, the things that had been familiar to me, I had confused with truth, and that is not an easy place to be. But I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have anybody to connect with. I didn't think I knew anybody else who had the same shift taking place in their worldview. I can promise you, if this is a worldview shaking moment, we now have hundreds, if not thousands of us who've experienced the exact same thing and just want to walk alongside you. Reach out to us at apogeestrong.com. Let's save the heroes together.